Hello and welcome to the Talking NorCal podcast, the official podcast of Active NorCal. I'm your host, Zach. With me here, as always, it's Chef B.O.B. What's up, Bob?
What's cooking?
How's it going on this fine day?
It's going really well. It's been a busy, productive day thus far. The weather's beautiful outside. No complaints here.
Weather is nice. It's actually been a while since we've done this.
It has, very much so.
We were both out of town, and then I got COVID. So we were going to try to do it over like Zoom and everything, but then we decided, you know what, let's get back. Let's do it right in studio. So we are back. We have so much to talk about because since we were gone. And so we don't have an interview today. We got some great interviews lined up for our next few episodes. But today we're just going to talk a lot about the current state of Northern California. Before we get into it, this episode is brought to you by the Active NorCal store. Go to store.activenorcal.com and use the promo code NorCal to get 10% off your first order in the store. We got hats, we got t-shirts, we got sweatshirts, we got stickers, we got everything going on. We're hoping to take our store game up a level here coming soon. We're working with a couple different vendors to make everything a little bit better, but we still got some awesome stuff in there right now. Go check it out. Once again, store.activenorcal.com. Use the promo code NorCal to get 10% off. That's all I got. Let's hop in this episode with the Tahoes, hella NorCal.
NorCal, we're hella NorCal, and I could spend all day just chilling in the South Bay. We're NorCal, we're hella NorCal, and there knows how to do to kick it down in Santa Cruz. We're NorCal, we're hella NorCal, and we get a little cray-cray when we visit the East Bay. We're NorCal, we're hella NorCal.
So, like I said, we got a lot of stuff that happened since the last time we were in studio here, and so we're going to catch up on everything today, you know, the drought, the fires. First, though, we should talk about my COVID experience because I do think it's important to talk about this stuff. And probably a lot of people went through what I went through, but I certainly learned a lot about COVID, even though we've constantly thought about it for the past year and a half. I don't think I got it. I might have had it before, but I know I got it this time. I tested positive and I was pretty sick.
I've always been I've always felt that when you thought that you'd had it, that I was like, I don't know, man. I think that you'll know when you have it, and then you got it, and you're like, yeah, you knew because you were feeling bad.
Well, what's interesting is January 2020, I got married. My wife and I got married in San Francisco, and we stayed for the week in a hotel in Chinatown during the Chinese New Year in January 2020, when no one thought that COVID was in the United States, but it makes sense since there were a lot of travelers from China coming in that COVID was there. I think, people have already acknowledged that COVID was probably in the United States even before then. The week after we got married and we stayed in the city, both of us got really sick. And I was thinking about it when I actually had COVID, last week, or was it it was last week. That was the most sick I've been since after our wedding. So it is possible that I got it in January 2020 and I didn't think that it was that, but it could have been.
But would you say that the one that to definitely have been COVID was significantly worse than the first time?
I think they were similar, to be honest. I was pretty darn sick. Again, it's impossible to know now, and it would make sense that I didn't get it, for the past year because I already had the antibodies from the first time I got it. And they say, you might have the antibodies for a year, So it makes sense that I wouldn't have gotten it leading up to.
And you also were vaccinated.
And I'm also vaccinated. So
as am I.
Right.
And what the story that is so weird about this is that probably the biggest social gathering that you had been to right around the time you were diagnosed was an event that we were both at.
We were both there. You, me, my wife, and a couple other people were staying in an Airbnb, and I was the only person to get it. And by the way, I my wife sat in quarantine with me. Now we stayed in different rooms. We stayed 6 feet apart within our home. She never got it. She tested herself a bunch of times. Never got COVID. So trying to determine how people get it's such a cluster. Like it's so hard to determine. But
and we all were trying to play safe. Once we found out that you got it, we also kind of quarantined just to make sure that we didn't get it, because there is that whole grace period that you could potentially not show symptoms. We tested ourselves, and we just never got it. No one that was around you. You were the only one at this over 150 person gathering that I know of that got it, and it's just incredible. So we went to a wedding. We came back on Sunday, and I was feeling tired. We had a lot of fun, and Monday woke up. I was tired. I was lethargic, but I came into the office and I was working, and then in the afternoon I wasn't feeling so good, so I went home and I was like working from home, and then I started dry coughing Monday night, and Tuesday morning, my wife's like, you gotta go get tested. So I went in, got the rapid test, tested positive immediately, was quarantined for 2 weeks. Called me from the parking lot like, hey,
you gotta go get tested.
You should probably go get tested, which I did right away.
I was in bed for 5 days, and it was, the first 2 days were really bad. Tuesday was really bad. And it just felt like a really bad, flu. Like it was congestion, coughing, just, so tired. I was sleeping. I am a notoriously bad sleeper. I slept for 10 hours a day or 10 hours a night, and then 2 or 3 hours of nap time during the day. Like I've never slept like that. My body was just exhausted from it. And after 2 days, I felt a lot better. But I still I just didn't have any energy. It just completely depleted me for a good 5 days. And then finally I started to feel normal, but then I had to sit in my house for another week. So, it's funny, the first, I was sick, but it kind of felt like a little vacation, because I was like, I just laid, I never, get a chance to just lay there and watch, movies and stuff. So that was nice, but it's really hard when you're feeling better to actually, I didn't leave my house. Not only that, I couldn't give my wife a hug. I slept in the guest room. So
I'll say from my perspective, I got to experience the testing facilities, the rapid testing facilities. Also got to experience the home tests, which were really actually much more technologically savvy than I was imagining they would be.
Yep.
Those ones that you get from CVS or whatever. But I wanted to do an official one, and so I went to one of those drive-through testing places where you just do it from your car, and it's a no touch, and you have to have an appointment and everything, and it was seamless. I spent a little money to get mine because I wanted to get it really fast, and they're like, and I didn't even really the which appointment to sign up for was. I was a little bit I just want to make sure I don't have COVID, but if it's the one that said COVID for sure is the one that was most expensive. And I was like, I'm sure they probably all are, but this is the only one that actually says COVID. So whatever, $150 for a test. I got it in an hour, and everything was professional, and it went really smoothly. So from my perspective, I just saw what the state facilities have given to the community, and I was impressed.
Again, I guess I did. There was a lot I didn't know about COVID. I met with my doctor multiple times, and we bought a bunch of at-home tests and that we found that we kind of just stocked up on because we found them, and you can test positive for 30 days afterwards. So I kept testing positive. I'm like, what the hell? I want to leave the house, and so I did a telephone meeting with my doctor, and they're like, no, you're fine as long as you don't have symptoms anymore, and you could test positive for a long time. So that was really interesting. It's a crazy time, man. And honestly, when sort of everything started to open back up and we weren't having to wear masks inside all the time, yada yada, I started getting really confident, oh, this thing's over. I'm done with that. Obviously everyone's so sick and tired of this whole thing, But now I have a new perspective, like with the Delta variant, we still got to be careful. And now, I'm masking up hardcore again. And I guess the one thing I can take away from it is I actually have a lot going on in the next couple months, and I know I have antibodies, so it's great.
I was going to say, yeah, we were able to, you, me, and your wife were all three able to really avoid COVID symptoms and to really stay away social distancing wise. And we're able to, from March of 2020 until September of 2021. And so, we made it a good deal and we thought we were out of the woods, but we as a family, really didn't get to experience it with anybody that was in close personal contact with us until then. And so, it was crazy that, and it feels like it just is new to us now. And so I totally agree with you.
Yeah. But I have a publishing conference I'm going to next week. I now feel good that, I won't get it there. And cause the last thing I want is to be, somewhere else, get it and have to quarantine there.
Right.
This conference is in Denver. I don't want to have to be stuck in a Denver hotel and have to foot the bill for that. If I do, if I were to get it. So I feel a lot better about that, but I still, I now also understand just the danger of how sick I got and having, I didn't have shortness of breath, but I certainly felt it. It was almost like I had smoked 10 cigars in a day. I could feel it in my throat as I was breathing. And I was like, oh, I see how this could be. It's almost like an allergic reaction when your throat kind of starts closing up a little bit. So anyway, glad I'm still alive. That's nice. And I really feel for all the people who are dealing with this right now. We need to be sensitive towards, our vulnerable population and just make sure everyone, stays safe and healthy. But a lot happened when I was in COVID, mostly wildfire stuff. And, when I was feeling up to it, we were able to cover as much as we could. So, basically the Dixie fire is now the largest single fire in California history. And, I think it burned a lot of places. It burned Greenville, and it's, grown to 910,000 acres currently with about 60% containment, all around Lake Almanor. And, that has been interesting. It's certainly probably going to surpass 1 million acres as a single fire. The largest fire in California's history is the August Complex, which was over 1 million, but that was multiple fires that joined together at the same time. This is one singular fire, which is pretty crazy. The whole fire, it's larger than Rhode Island, the entire fire, which is crazy. So that was something we were following throughout, and we'll talk a little bit about that more later, especially pertaining to Lassen. And then the Calder fire. The Calder fire really, it's been going for a little bit. The town of Grizzly Flats was burned a couple weeks ago by it, which was super sad. But when I was in quarantine, it took off towards Tahoe. And that was so crazy to watch. It currently sits at 216,646 acres, around 50% contained. Were you watching as that happened? Did you follow the news?
I was trying to see, yes, I was. And I was looking at maps. Everyone wants to know exactly where it is, where it's going. And because everyone loves Tahoe. And it's also, everyone had to evacuate quickly. It was a very dangerous situation for the community, a community that I love. So, I was paying attention.
Yeah, it's a lot of people, were saying, how come you guys put so much time into this fire compared to others? And I think it does. I think a lot of people in Northern California have a connection with Tahoe just because it is a tourist destination, whether you live there or not, whether you own a cabin there or not, which I know plenty of people who do, and they still don't know if their cabin is standing. But, I have a strong personal connection with Tahoe. I spent so much time there snowboarding when I was in college. And one of the places that is impacted by it and probably will be impacted by it for years to come was Sierra at Tahoe. And so for me, watching as the flames approach Sierra, was a hard pill to swallow, I guess. And, we'll talk about it here in a second, but, I think we made it out okay. Sierra did, at least. And, by the way, we did some merch for this. We did some Tahoe Strong merch, which actually did really well. We're gonna do all the math and see how much we raised. It was well over $1,000, I know. But it was just, I was laying in bed in quarantine, and I just following this thing so intently, and it was just, it's crazy that this is like the world we're living in now,
Yeah, we saw it coming, and it's, it's unfortunate that we have to spend the majority of what we talk about on this podcast talking about either drought-related or fire-related topics. But, what does is it hits home. When we saw our hometown of Redding go up in flames, we couldn't stop watching. Similar to this, you say you spent a lot of time snowboarding in Tahoe in college. We used to go to Tahoe every Thanksgiving as a family. Yeah. So, we have a really strong bond and love for that area. So seeing it, and that let's just get into the first fire news. This is an all fire news topic podcast today. Sierra at Tahoe burned in the Caldor fire. What exactly was touched? What was exactly burned in Sierra at Tahoe?
So only obviously, I don't know. I haven't been up there to see it. Like, no one can go up there really, but one building was burned. A storage facility, I believe, was burned. Other than that, they did a really good job protecting the lifts as well as the lodge at the bottom. Well, they got
creative with it.
They used snow guns. They used snow blowers to, and it's, I never considered it before, but it's genius. They're just massive hoses, and the only time you can make snow is when it's freezing temperatures out. It's 32 degrees or less, so it's hot, and they're just like, let's just blow water. So they just all night long as the fire passed through, and it passed through pretty quickly. They were just blowing water all over the bottom lodge. I mean, that was the most important thing. As long as that didn't burn down and as long as there wasn't significant damage to the lifts, they're going to be okay. Now, we've seen, and now seeing the impact of these fires years out, we're talking about the car fire, Whiskeytown trails are still closed because of that fire, because it weakens the foundation of the land, it weakens trees, it makes a dangerous scene at these places. So the question remains, how is Sierra going to be closed for the next year? I don't know. 2 years even?
No, I don't know. I kind of doubt it, right? But they got the facilities to be able to make some improvements.
But you think about it. So that's a big mountain with a ton of backdoor area, or backdoor. A ton of backcountry areas. So there's a lot of trees. So essentially they have to go through and look at every single tree and make sure it is, it's not fully compromised by the flames. And that's going to take forever. And my guess is they're going to be impacted heavily by the weakened by the fire. So you can't be having people snowboarding through, potentially leaning on a tree, say, and it falling over. That is super dangerous. Or like, tree wells are really dangerous when it's super snowy. Will those be even worse because of the fire? I mean, there's a lot of questions, and this is just something we don't know. How does wildfire impact a ski resort? We don't know. We didn't know how big it would impact the man-made trails in Whiskeytown, and it turns out it impacts them a lot. So, and by the way, they're now letting people back into South Lake Tahoe, not so much the Myers, Christmas Valley area, but South Lake Tahoe. But Calder Fire is still burning actively, and especially around the areas of Kirkwood. So, I mean, it's certainly not over yet, and we could see more damage like this. But this is a first, a Northern California ski resort being burned in a massive wildfire, and I can't say that I'm shocked.
No, I mean, it just keeps getting worse and worse, and more things that we never thought would burn are going to burn in the coming years unless we get rain. We'd really like to get some rain.
Right.
Well, the next story, same fire. Fire officials have formed a miracle-saving home in South Lake Tahoe from the Caldor fire. Yeah,
this was actually a really popular article on our website because we really got deep into how they did it. Because when the Caldor fire, it went through Sierra Tahoe, and then it hits Echo Summit. And if anyone has taken the 50 down Echo Summit into South Lake, it is, and this was a quote by a fire official, it's like looking down a gun barrel. It comes down that ravine into it, and there's homes all the way until the lake. So essentially, these firefighters said, okay, we know it's going to burn down the hill. And they just started working really hard to protect all the homes. And there's a line that goes around all the homes in Myers, Christmas Valley area, all to South Lake Tahoe, and essentially all the way to Heavenly. And they created this, they bulldozed lines.
Fire lines.
Yes. So essentially, they dig up the dirt, they create these huge piles of dirt, and they double dozed it, which means there's two giant mounds of dirt, and they made that dozer line like 60 feet long.
60 feet? It's usually like 20, right?
Right. They had to do this. They had to do this, or else there was going to be a significant loss of homes. So they did double dozer lines, completely surrounding Myers all the way. If you turn onto Pioneer Road, they did it all next to Pioneer Road, and then essentially did it on the west side of Heavenly, on the California side of Heavenly, to block everything. And, quite frankly, it is shocking what they were able to do to protect these homes.
They also, didn't they douse a lot of area with fire retardant as well?
Yes, of course. And that was more of a tactic in like the Kirkwood area, that they were using those, retardant and water. They were dropping a lot. I don't think they use that tactic as much on the neighborhoods. I could be wrong, but they do that a lot in like the wilderness areas. They did a lot around Echo Lake, which is a magnificent place if you've never been there. I think they did some in the Desolation Wilderness, which is another place that burned, which is kind of crazy. Although it's going to be hard to say how much actually burned. There's not like a ton of trees up that high elevation of Desolation Wilderness. And of course, the homes up in the higher elevation near Sierra Tahoe along 50 there did burn. Some did, some were saved. From what I understand, most of the homes that burned were on the north side of 50. But it was really a miracle what they were able to do, because the fire came down right when a red flag warning hit. There was 30-mile-an-hour winds. There were dry fuels. It was the worst case scenario, and yet they were able to perform these home-saving, these life-saving tactics that, essentially saved South Lake Tahoe. So it was those days, and it seems like so long ago when I was sitting in quarantine doing this. I guess it was about a week ago now. Those days seemed really scary at the time, and I'm glad we were able to make it out of there alive and in the best condition as we can be considering the circumstances.
Shout out Cal Fire.
All the firefighters.
All the firefighters.
Yeah.
All right. Well, next story, very much similarly related. Looters arrested all over South Lake Tahoe during these fires.
These people are the worst. When they evacuate a place, you can sneak through the cracks, right? When they mandatory evacuate a place, And some people stay home. Some people choose to stay home. I read there's this guy who I know that he stayed home because he's already in a burn area. So it all burned around his house. And he said, we have an evacuation plan, but he never left. And it's expensive to leave. Like, let's just call it what it is. It's really expensive to evacuate. You pay for your own hotel. These hotels in like Reno were saying, we got a deal for evacuees, but it's still expensive. You're still going to drop at least $1,000 on a place to stay. So some people stay in these evacuated zones. Well, unfortunately, some of those people who stay and stick around are looters. And I think they arrested 5 people for looting, 4 of which had drug paraphernalia on them, right? So these are drug addicts stealing from homes. These cops, by the way, it's actually kind of easy if you're a cop to identify these people because the town's empty, right? So the only people driving around are firefighters or police. And so you see a random car driving around in the middle of a mandatory evacuation zone, you have a good right to pull them over, So they found people stealing stuff all over the place. One guy I saw on social media posted his Ring camera. He had a guy walking through his backyard, and like his Ring camera alerted him, and he got him on video. So I'm sure they caught the guy. But these people are the worst of the worst. They should be publicly flogged. I just cannot believe people will do this in such a terrible circumstance. And I have to assume that most of these people are just drug addicts.
Absolutely. Yeah. They're definitely pieces of shit.
We've now seen this happen in all these different fires. We saw it in the car fire. We've seen all these people, and most of the time they're cruising around with meth, smoking meth, stealing stuff, and they are the worst people on the planet. And I hope they get help, because obviously you are in a really bad mental state or in a really bad drug-induced psychosis if you're willing to take advantage of this crisis and steal from people who are evacuated due to a fire. But it's funny because police are posting their pictures all over social media, and everyone's sharing it to publicly humiliate these people for being terrible human beings.
Maybe this will be the change they need in their lives.
Maybe, yeah, but it's just shocking that they would do such a terrible thing.
Well, and also Tahoe residents didn't just have to deal with humans looting. They also had to deal with bears. Bears ransacked South Lake Tahoe homes during evacuation.
This is the least shocking headline you've ever read, right? Bears would constantly go into homes if it weren't for humans being there. And you leave your house and, bears are going to come in. Not only that, but they are being pushed out of the wilderness from the fire into these areas that are being protected by firefighters, and they're looking for food. And they know there's food in these houses. So they say bear break-ins essentially in South Lake Tahoe tripled during the evacuation. People came home to their homes ransacked. And what's interesting is like there's a lot of different quote unquote tactics for evacuating. One of those tactics sometimes is to just leave your door open to allow firefighters to get in and use your home if they need to fight the fire. So I have a sense that some of these bears just had an easy, they could pull the handle and get in easily. And it's again not shocking because we know bears they do this when people are home, and so for people to be gone and them to break in, not shocking.
Bears they don't sense the humans, so they feel more comfortable. There's not as much litter and food available because of the humans, and so they're needing more food from somewhere else, so they're feeling a little bit more ballsy. And that's why, there's even reports of bears being sighted by fairly close to the casinos.
Yep. Yeah, they were breaking in all the way down to the casino. I saw a picture online of it was an RV like parked on the side of the road, and it kind of looked like 50. It looked like a big busy road. I think it was 50, and the the bear didn't get into the door, but the bear had basically ripped the door apart trying to get into this thing. And typically, eventually someone would see the bear and stop it, right? But because there's no one around, it just has the ability to just ransack this door.
All the time in the world.
All the time in the world. Again, not the most shocking news I've ever read. We're certainly not going to judge these bears like we judge looters, because they're just trying to get a bite to eat. And by the way, there was another video, I think we actually posted it, of bears. They hopped into someone's backyard with a garden and they ate all their garden. And the person who like posted it online said, I'm glad I was able to provide them food, because they really are screwed in that situation. Like you have to escape the fire, and then you're put into these populated areas. So, also, there's been a couple different bears burned in this fire. One I saw they had to euthanize because it was burned so badly. Tamarack, the bear cub, who I don't know if we talked about on the podcast. In the Tamarack fire, this bear cub was burned really bad on its paws, and they took it in and they took it to the Lake Tahoe Wildlife Foundation, I believe it's called, and they took care of it. And this little bear cub broke out. Literally, did you read this?
No.
This bear broke out. He like dug a hole underneath like this giant fence, climbed out, and they kept seeing him like climbing around the trees, but they couldn't catch him. And they spotted him recently, and he survived another fire. So good
Awesome.
job by Tamarack,
Let's
the bear
go.
cub. Yeah.
Well, let's go.
I thought it was hilarious. They had these huge wraps on his paws because they were burned, and he still managed to dig those out. And I think the last photo they have of him, he did not have the covers on his paws anymore, so he finally like ripped them off or whatever. But yeah,
He seems to be thriving.
bears. Hey, and it is a wildlife have to deal with this stuff too. You know what I mean?
Yes, they do. Well, okay. I think that's enough about the Caldor fire. Let's talk about the other fire we got going on. Approximately 60% of Lassen Volcanic National Fire torched in the Dixie fire.
Yes. So we've covered this extensively, but again, not on this podcast. The Dixie fire burned through the southwestern portion of Lassen. And it came in, and that's a remote area, but it kept moving and moving and moving in. It ended up burning the areas around Kings Creek Fall, around Bumpus Hell, Juniper Lake, and eventually the Yom Kamani. I always have trouble saying that. Yom Kamani Visitor Center. So yes, 60% so far of the park burned. Obviously, the northern entrance with like Manzanita Lake was okay, but
So far.
And by the way, weather has improved this week, so I know the containment numbers have increased significantly recently, and I think they're making good progress on the Dixie fire, even though it's gonna burn like another 100,000 acres probably. But this is big news. Again, as we mentioned earlier, we've seen what wildfire does to these areas. So the question is Lassen going to close for a long time? Because these places are the foundation has been burned. According to park officials, the Bumpus Hell boardwalk survived. So that's good. But the trail to the boardwalk was burned.
Which is a new trail.
Which is a brand new trail, and they spent a lot of money on it.
And it took a long time to make.
And it took 2 years to make. So that we might not be able to go to Bumpus Hell for a while. Again. Kings Creek Falls is probably even worse. And So people might not be able to make that hike for a long time. There's just we are now seeing limited availability for places to visit, and we're going to talk about it. Like, all the outdoor areas are closed in Northern California. It's like these fires are have so many impacts on us. It's pretty crazy.
Well, this one particularly hurt because, we touch on Tahoe and how that meant to us as kids and even young adults. Yosemite is a place that I've always loved and talked about how I've always loved, but Lassen is a place that our dad has been taking us since as little as I can remember. We even used to go there every year as a field trip from summer camp. I mean, we've been to Lassen Volcanic National Park, over 50 times in reality. Yeah. And it's a place that is very near and dear to our hearts. So it's tough to see this. And kind of speaking on the same note, all national forests in California remain closed due to fire threat. And they just all had to make this decision. And it's tough because we all enjoy going to these places and we can't just because of fire.
Yes. It's crazy. I mean, this is why we started Active NorCal, because these outdoor destinations are what make us who we are, right? This is why you live here. This is why you visit here. And yet, we look at some of the top places that you just can't go. Whiskey Town. I mean, they're probably going to open some of those trails in Whiskey Town next year to open the entire park again. But, it's been closed for a couple years. Lassen's going to be closed for a while. Tahoe, areas of Tahoe is going to be closed for a while. So these fires have a huge impact on tourism, on the economy, and on the residents who live and recreate here. So, but by the way, we didn't even mention the Mount Harkness fire lookout burned, which they just renovated. It's a 100-year-old fire tower. They just renovated it. So.
And has been there for 100 years and hasn't burned, but finally did. And it's like, that's just showing to the extent that we just are moving in the wrong direction.
Yeah. And they'll rebuild it. They still use that to this day. A fire lookout. I mean, a fire lookout with all the technology we have, it seems like an old way to do it, but they still use it. I mean, you still have to spot these little small fires as they start to get people in as soon as possible. But a lot was lost in this Dixie fire, and it continues to go. I have to say, in speaking of the Dixie fire, it's another thing that firefighters really did a great job of, and I don't want to take away from anyone who lost their homes, whether it be in Greenville or the Lake Almanor area, but the fire essentially burned all the way around Chester. So Chester, the town of Chester, is surrounded by burned area, but somehow they were able to keep it out of the town of Chester, which was pretty amazing. But yeah, the Dixie fire, this is going to be a historic fire. It's probably going to be the largest fire in California's history. It's already the single largest, as I mentioned earlier, because the August complex was multiple fires that joined together. This is a singular fire. It's crazy. These numbers keep getting bigger, and these fires keep, getting worse and worse.
And I don't know why this is coming to mind right now, but we keep talking. Well, the East Coast keeps dealing with these crazy floods. Hurricanes and floods, and we can't catch a break. I mean, either coast can't catch a break. I've been watching a lot of historical stuff and how it used to be north versus south, and now it's east versus west. I don't know. I just thought about that, but
well, you're right. It is. They're seeing the exact opposite. They're seeing flooding. They're seeing hurricanes, and it was crazy because is it Hurricane Ida? Mm-hmm. Hurricane Ida was happening as the Calder fire was happening, and as I was refreshing Twitter constantly to try to get updates on the fire, it was either Ida or Calder, and both of them impacted a lot of people. So, climate change. Anyone that denies climate change at this point is just is an idiot, quite frankly. I mean, you can debate on what it is, what causes it. I say it is man-made, and I think science says it's man-made. We actually just did an article about we sort of looked at it. Will Northern California portions of Northern California become uninhabitable because of climate change? And the answer is yes. The answer is yes. You look at these. I mean, I've talked to a lot of people who want to live up in these rural areas in the woods, but insurance is really hard to get now in those areas, and real estate is really expensive when you could lose that home at any second due to wildfire. So, and I can only imagine, like, we are lucky we're not in an area that could burn. I can only imagine what it's like mentally to live in an area and constantly be on guard and have a huge evacuation plan, which everyone should have. And so it's just, things are different than they were just 3-4 years ago.
Yeah. And we're moving in the wrong direction.
Yep.
Now, how much do you think the communities around the national forests in California lost out on being closed Labor Day weekend?
A ton.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people don't understand how much of Northern California is a national forest. We have 9 national forests in Northern California, including the largest in California, the Shasta Trinity National Forest, which I don't think a lot of people understand how big the Shasta Trinity. It goes from basically, like the Redding area to the Trinity Alps and up Shasta Lake, all the way up to Mount Shasta and around. And that was close. Luckily, they gave exemptions to lake businesses. So like the Shasta Lake marinas stayed open during the closure. Lake Shasta Caverns stayed open during closure. But it's, these places remain closed until September 17th. So that was today. They were supposed to reopen today and September 7th, and then they pushed it back again. They might push it back again and again. Who knows? I mean, it may just be we can't go to a lot of these places,
Well, we drove up to Oregon, 2 weeks ago, and from Sacramento to Oregon, it was completely smoky the whole time. I thought that there was going to be some relief somewhere, and there wasn't. And it's just, this is the new norm.
Driving through Mount Shasta
couldn't see the mountain.
Was the most shocking thing. We actually pulled through the town because I love Mount Shasta, and I wanted to show my wife a couple different places when we were in the car, and the whole time I was looking up to the right, and you couldn't see the mountain. And by the way,
you text me because I drove by first, and you're like, "How's the mountain look?" And I'm like, "I
don't
have no
know.
idea."
By the way, in that drive coming back from Oregon, just north of Mount Shasta, is one of the most stunning sights you've ever seen, because seeing the south facing or the north facing end of Mount Shasta is gorgeous coming from that area. It's like high desert up there, and so you can see it very clear. Couldn't see it. Did not see the mountain once, which is it's just I've never seen that before. Never.
The most shocking thing to me in that drive was driving over Bridge Bay Bridge. And it just being...
No, you're talking... Lakehead Bridge.
Yeah. That's what I'm talking about. And it just being like a puddle underneath. Like, it was unrecognizable from what I've seen before. And that really kind of goes into the next story that we were going to talk about. Low water levels allow kayakers to paddle through historic train tunnels on Shasta Lake. But which was a cool story, right? That's a cool, positive story, but it really isn't. Right. It all has to do with the massive drought that we're currently going.
Yeah. So going back to Lakehead, I mean, it's just like a creek through there. And there's actually, if you look,
can like jump across it. Like it's like not even a creek.
If you're heading north, if you look to the left, there's the old Lakehead Bridge. I think it's called the Lakehead Bridge that I've jumped off of a million times in the water. And sometimes the water gets so high where it's like barely a jump. It's like, but, as the water gets lower, it can kind of be like a high jump. If you look to the right, there is a cliff that sits right next to a campsite where you can jump off into the water. Now, that cliff literally does not have, it has zero water under it.
It's just a cliff.
And as you came, like if you come down the cliff, you probably have a good 100 yards till you get to any water, and it's just like a creek. That is astounding. But back to so the historic train tunnel. So it's the old railroad tunnel that used to go by Kennett, California, which is the historic town under the water of Lake Shasta, and the water has to be at a perfect level. Because as the lake is essentially losing about a foot a day, which is pretty crazy. But so as it gets lower and lower and lower, then you can walk through the tunnel, but you can't kayak through it. So this is a very rare opportunity.
You got to time it perfectly.
You got to time it perfectly. And from what I saw, a lot of people did this over the last like 2 weeks or so. I don't know if you can do it anymore, but pretty cool. I mean, you basically go through this like old structure, and then you can paddle through the tunnel onto the other side. Really cool, look through history.
It is one positive that we can take away from all the negatives. Like this looks really cool, and there's a lot of history to it. This train tunnel was built in 1884. That was 100 years before I was born, and I'm pretty old. It just looks really cool. I would rather kayak it than walk through it personally. I love the videos and all of the people posting. It's just one of those things. I've never seen. How do you get to this area?
So I actually don't know. I watched a lot of stuff. I know around where it is, and from, I'm pretty sure you can pull up like basically like really close to it, drop your kayak in, and just come around.
But if we wanted to like rent kayaks somewhere on Shasta Lake, like where do you think the closest place to rent them?
I'm not even sure, to be honest. You probably rent a kayak in town and Redding, like Headwaters Kayak. You can rent it from there, and then but again, I don't think you can do this anymore. I think
it's probably too low at this point.
It's probably too low. Although, and I don't know if I can ever remember a time when you could walk through it. Like, I don't think the lake has ever been that low in my entire life.
When I was researching for us to talk about this, saw it and saw somebody walking through it, and I was like,
really?
I didn't even know. Well, I mean, you can see in one of these pictures that you're able to walk in there at least. Oh, maybe not. There might be some water in there, but I've never seen anybody walk through it personally.
2015 was the last time I remember the lake being this low, and then before that, I don't really remember any time through my childhood that it was this low. So this could be the lowest we've ever seen it. It's not the lowest Shasta Lake's ever been, but it's the lowest we've ever seen it. There was a drought in the 70s where it probably got this low. By the way, Lake Orville is the lowest it's ever been, and it is crazy how low Lake Orville is, but it is a silver lining in all of this that we can see the history that is underwater.
It's pretty crazy how well it's held up.
Yeah,
I mean, it's almost 140 years old, and like once the water drops, it looks like it could totally function perfectly today as it did the day that it was put underwater.
There's also an old highway, like bridge that comes through that you can see now that was buried. I think that highway, it was built in like the early 1900s, and then obviously went underwater in 1945 when they built the dam. But there's a lot you can go out there and see right now that is 99% of the time covered in water. So it's an interesting time here to see all this stuff, and hopefully this is not something we see a lot in the coming years, but we probably will.
And the last story that we were going to talk about today is it's a unique one. It's a little bit of an opinion story. Is Mount Shasta really devoid of snow for the first time ever?
So this was one reason I really wanted to look at Mount Shasta on our drive, but unfortunately I couldn't see it. So there was a viral tweet that by Alex Steffen, who essentially claimed for the first time in history, or the first time in recorded history, there's no snow on Mount Shasta. And, it's snow stays on the mountain throughout the summer, mostly because of glaciers. It's not, no, the answer is no. There's glacier on the mountain still, and it's possible that glacier disappears this summer, which would be crazy. But also this picture this guy shared on the viral tweet is it's essentially Lake Shastina, or not Lake, Mount Shastina, which is not Mount Shasta. It's like connected to Mount Shasta, if anyone knows the geology of everything. But so there is still a little bit, but we could see it for quote unquote the first time ever. No snow at all on the mountain.
I think his point was made, though. The picture is kind of side by side how it started versus how it's going, and it caused a lot of debate on Twitter. But really, he did what he wanted to do and posed the question. Like he even says, "Is this what climate / ecological discontinuity looks like on the ground?" And it's so it going viral was on purpose, and it's
either way, Mount Shasta never gets this bare around this time. Usually, you might see it this bare in October or early November leading up to winter, but it's certainly not in August. So that's the answer is no. This is not the first time because there is still a little bit of snow. But
professionals weighed in on this one, legitimately.
Right.
It's not. It's been done before, and it's not bare, technically. There's still glaciers.
Right. It's he made his point. The answer is no, but he made his point. This is, it's just crazy how there's no snow in the Sierra. There's no snow on any of the mountains. We looked at pictures of Lassen before the Dixie fire came in. That was empty. Which I did that hike last summer, and there was a decent amount of snow. So this is all. By the way, this is going to impact the water supply of the entire state for years to come. I mean, what people don't understand is when water falls on Mount Shasta, it sits in there for 50 years until it pops up into the Sacramento River, right? Which is always something I love thinking about. It's something that fell in the 1970s is now what we're seeing flow right past us in the Sacramento River. But we're gonna have impacts of this drought for years to come, and it's just kind of crazy to think about.
Rain dance.
Yes, we got to do.
Let it rain.
We need rain. I don't see it coming anytime soon, but we need a big winter, or else this could get really bad next year, both from a water perspective and from a fire perspective.
And all we can do is hope.
Yeah. So that's it for this episode, right? We talked a lot about the fires. We covered everything. Unfortunately, drought is the number one thing we're seeing because it really is impacting all recreation, all the stories. People's livelihoods are being impacted by this, and it's really tough. But so next week we got some really good interviews coming up, and I don't want to spoil them what they are yet. We're gonna do some fire stuff. We're gonna do some cannabis stuff coming up. That should be fun. So thank you for listening to this episode of the Talking NorCal podcast. Please subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. We're on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio. Wherever you listen to your podcast, we're there. You can also watch all of these episodes on YouTube. Follow Talking NorCal on YouTube. We also post our highlights to the Active NorCal YouTube feed. And on social, you can see all this on social. We actually had a fun little social when we talked about the Lemurian guy. A lot of people responded to that video. So follow us on all of our socials. You're going to have a lot of fun, I promise you. And thank you for listening. And remember, stay active.
NorCal, we're hella NorCal. And I could spend all day just chilling in the South Bay. We're NorCal, we're hella NorCal. And Darren knows how to do to kick it down in Santa Cruz or NorCal. We're hella NorCal. And we get a little cray-cray when we visit the East Bay. We're NorCal. We're hella NorCal. And we get a little mental when we visit Sacramento. Yeah, we're NorCal. We're hella NorCal. And we protecting nature's bounty when we visit Humboldt County. Yeah, we're NorCal. We're hella NorCal. And me, I'm hella cool, 'cause I live in Sebastopol. We're NorCal. We're hella NorCal. And you know that we gotta go where